What if I told you that somewhere in Prague, there's an apartment building where the laws of physics don't apply? Where residents wake up to find their homes have grown in the night, stretching into impossible dimensions that shouldn't exist. This isn't science fiction. This is the documented case of apartment building 12 on Vinohrady Street. And by the time winter arrived in 1973, the hallways had no end. My name is Marcus, and today I'm going to tell you about one of the most disturbing architectural anomalies ever recorded, a story that the Czech government tried desperately to bury, and why every single person who lived there is now either dead or missing. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever woken up in your own home and felt like something was different? Like the distance between your bedroom and bathroom had somehow stretched overnight? Most people would dismiss this feeling, blame it on grogginess or stress. The residents of Building 12 made that same mistake. Until it was too late to ignore. The building was constructed in 1960, just months after the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. It was supposed to be a symbol of progress, a modern communist housing project that would showcase the efficiency of socialist urban planning. 8 stories, 48 units, built with concrete and steel imported directly from Moscow. The architect, a man named Viktor Zerner, had designed dozens of similar buildings across Eastern Europe. Nothing about this project should have been different, but Viktor Zerner had a secret that wouldn't surface until decades later. When researchers began digging into the building's foundation records, you see, Building 12 wasn't built on empty land. It was constructed directly on top of the ruins of the Sankt Apollonia Monastery, a medieval religious complex that had been destroyed during the Hussite Wars in 1420-1. The monastery wasn't just any religious building. Historical records, hidden in Vatican archives until 1995, revealed that Sankt Apollonia was built specifically to house what the Catholic Church called the geometrically afflicted. Monks who claimed that God spoke to them through impossible mathematical dimensions. These monks spent their lives creating architectural drawings of spaces that couldn't exist in our reality, believing that if they could build these impossible structures, they could create a bridge between our world and the divine. When the Hussites burned the monastery, they didn't just kill the monks. They destroyed centuries of architectural research into what medieval scholars called non-Euclidean sacred geometry. The monks had been trying to build rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside, hallways that curved back on themselves in ways that defied physics, spaces that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Viktor Zerner knew none of this when he began construction in 1968. But as his workers dug the foundation, they kept finding things. Stone fragments carved with mathematical symbols that made no sense. Metal tools shaped like geometric instruments that served no recognizable purpose. And strangest of all, architectural drawings etched into stone tablets, showing floor plans for buildings that couldn't possibly exist. Instead of reporting these findings to the authorities, Zerner became obsessed. He began studying the medieval drawings, trying to decode their meaning. And slowly, he began incorporating elements of these impossible designs into his modern apartment building. Hidden in the concrete and steel of Building 12 were structural elements that followed medieval non-Euclidean principles. The first residents moved in during the summer of 1960. 48 families, mostly Communist Party officials and their relatives, selected for their loyalty and discretion. At first, everything seemed normal. The apartments were spacious by Eastern European standards, with high ceilings and large windows. The hallways were wide and well lit. People were happy. But then the complaints started. Mrs. Elena Novak, who lived in apartment 3B, was the first to notice something wrong. She reported to the building superintendent that her kitchen had somehow grown larger overnight. Not by much, maybe half a meter in each direction, but enough that she had to readjust all her furniture. The superintendent, a party loyalist named Jan Svoboda, dismissed her complaint as typical female hysteria. Within 2 weeks, 5 more residents had made similar reports. Bedrooms that stretched longer than they had been the day before. Bathrooms, where the distance between the sink and toilet had mysteriously increased. Closets that seemed to have developed additional space that definitely hadn't been there when they moved in. Jan Svoboda began keeping detailed records of these complaints, not because he believed them, but because he was required to document all maintenance requests. His logbook, discovered in Czech State Archives in 2008, tells an increasingly disturbing story. By September of 1969, every single resident had reported that their apartment had grown in some way, but the growth wasn't random. Each apartment seemed to be expanding along specific geometric patterns, following rules that made no mathematical sense but were surprisingly consistent. The hallways were the first common areas to change. Residents began reporting that it took longer to walk from the lobby to their apartments. At first, people assumed they were just tired or distracted. But when Mrs. Novak timed her walk from the ground floor to her third-floor apartment, she discovered it was taking her 4 minutes longer than when she had first moved in. Impossible, but true. The building superintendent began his own investigation. Using a measuring tape, he discovered that the hallway on the third floor was now 63 meters long. According to the original blueprints, it should have been 38 meters, but when he checked the building's exterior dimensions, they hadn't changed at all. Somehow, the inside of the building was growing while the outside remained the same size. By November of 1969, the changes had accelerated. Residents reported that their apartments were continuing to grow, but not in ways that made architectural sense. Mrs. Novak's kitchen now had a corner that seemed to curve away into space that shouldn't exist, according to the building's structure. Mr. Pavel Devoke, who lived on the 5th floor, discovered that his bedroom had developed what he described as a second wall behind the first wall, creating a narrow space that ran parallel to his room but had no apparent entrance. The most disturbing reports came from the families with children. Little Anna Svobodova, the superintendent's 7-year-old daughter, told her father that she had found a new room in their apartment. When he asked her to show him, she led him to what should have been a small storage closet. But instead of the cramped space he remembered, Jan found a room large enough to stand in comfortably, with walls that seemed to extend further than the building's exterior could possibly allow. That's when Jan Svoboda made the decision that would seal his fate, and the fate of everyone else in the building. Instead of reporting these anomalies to the housing authorities, he decided to investigate further. He was a loyal communist, trained to believe that every problem had a rational, scientific solution. He began documenting everything, measuring the expanding spaces, interviewing residents, trying to find a logical explanation for what was happening. His notes from December 1969 reveal the depth of his growing obsession. The building wasn't just growing randomly, it was following patterns, mathematical progressions that seemed to accelerate based on some kind of schedule. The expansions happened primarily at night, between midnight and 4 a.m. They followed geometric principles that seemed to bend the rules of three-dimensional space. But the most chilling discovery came when Jan began mapping the building's new layout. As he drew floor plans of the expanded apartments and hallways, he realized that the patterns matched exactly with the medieval stone etchings that had been found during construction. Somehow, the building was growing according to the non-Euclidean architectural principles developed by the monks of Sankt Apollonia Monastery 500 years earlier. By winter of 1970, the hallways had begun to curve in ways that shouldn't be possible within the building's fixed exterior dimensions. Residents reported walking down corridors that seemed to loop back on themselves, but not in simple circles. These were more complex geometric curves that created the illusion of infinite length within finite space. Mrs. Novak, whose apartment had grown the most dramatically, made a discovery that terrified everyone in the building. While exploring the expanded areas of her home, she found a door that hadn't been there before. Behind it was a staircase that led upward, even though her apartment was on the 3rd floor and there should have been another apartment directly above her. When she climbed the stairs, she found herself in what appeared to be a 9th floor, even though the building only had 8 stories. The hallway on this impossible 9th floor stretched in both directions further than she could see, lined with doors to apartments that couldn't exist. She knocked on one of the doors. Someone answered. It was Mr. František Zerna, an elderly man she had never seen before, who claimed to have been living in the building since it opened. But there was no František Zerna on any of the tenant records. Jan Svoboda had memorized every resident, and this man didn't exist according to any official documentation. František invited Mrs. Novak into his apartment, and what she saw there convinced her that something supernatural was happening. In Building 12, his apartment was enormous, with rooms that seemed to stretch beyond the physical boundaries of the building. He had a library filled with books written in languages she didn't recognize, containing architectural drawings of impossible structures. He had a kitchen with windows that looked out onto a view of Prague that couldn't exist from their location. When Mrs. Novak asked him how long he had been living there, František smiled and said he had been waiting for the building to grow enough for people to find him. He had been alone on the 9th floor for what felt like decades, watching as the building slowly expanded according to the plans left by the medieval monks. That's when Mrs. Novak learned the terrible truth about Building 12. František Zerna wasn't just any resident, he was the nephew of Viktor Zerna, the building's architect. But unlike his uncle, František had understood the true purpose of the medieval architectural drawings. Viktor had tried to incorporate the non-Euclidean elements as mere curiosities, not realizing he was creating a structure designed to grow beyond the boundaries of normal space. František had been placed in the building as a kind of guardian, someone who understood the supernatural mechanics of the expanding structure. He had been living in the impossible spaces that existed between floors, in rooms that occupied dimensions not normally accessible to human consciousness. But his role wasn't just to observe. He was there to guide the expansion, to ensure that the building grew according to the specific geometric principles that the medieval monks had discovered. The building wasn't just getting bigger randomly. It was evolving into something that the Sankt Apollonia monks had designed as a bridge between our reality and something else entirely. Mrs. Novak asked the obvious question, what was the building becoming? František's answer was simple and terrifying. The building was becoming a doorway. The medieval monks hadn't been trying to communicate with God through impossible mathematics. They had been trying to open a passage to what they called the spaces between spaces, dimensions that existed parallel to our reality, but followed completely different physical laws. The expansion of Building 12 wasn't just architectural growth, it was the slow opening of a portal that would eventually allow things from those parallel dimensions to enter our world, and it was working. By spring of 1971, residents began reporting encounters with people who shouldn't exist. Families living in apartments that weren't on any floor plan. Children playing in hallways that led to nowhere. Elderly residents who had supposedly died years ago, walking through expanded corridors that connected to spaces outside normal reality. The building's elevator began stopping at floors that didn't exist, according to the original blueprints. Residents would press the button for the 5th floor and find themselves on what appeared to be a 15th floor, with hallways that stretched beyond the horizon in all directions. Jan Svoboda's final logbook entries, dated July 1971, describe his growing realization that the situation was beyond any normal solution. The building had become something that couldn't be explained by architecture or physics. It had become a living structure that was actively reshaping reality around itself. His last entry is brief. The hallways no longer have walls at the end, they just continue. Mrs. Novak hasn't been seen for 3 days. I can hear her calling for help, but her voice comes from directions that don't exist. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to find her. If anyone reads this, don't let them build more buildings here. Jan Svoboda disappeared on July 23, 1971. His body was never found. By winter of 1973, the official records show that Building 12 had 48 empty apartments, but residents of neighboring buildings reported seeing lights in windows on floors that didn't exist, and hearing voices calling from rooms that couldn't be there, according to the building's original structure. The Czech government quietly condemned the building in 1974, claiming structural instability. But instead of demolishing it, they simply sealed all the entrances and declared it off-limits. No explanation was ever given to the families of the missing residents. The building still stands today. Officially, it's been empty for over 50 years, but local residents report that lights still appear in windows on floors that shouldn't exist. People walking past late at night sometimes hear voices calling from inside, speaking in languages that sound almost familiar but not quite right. Urban explorers who have managed to break into the building describe hallways that seem to stretch infinitely in all directions. Rooms that are far larger than the building's exterior could possibly contain, and stairwells that lead to floors that exist beyond the building's official height. Most disturbing of all are the reports of encounters with the original residents. People claim to have met Mrs. Novak, still wandering through expanded corridors, looking for a way back to her original apartment. Others report conversations with Jan Svoboda, who seems to be perpetually searching for residents who disappeared decades ago. These encounters always end the same way. The original residents warn newcomers not to go deeper into the building, not to climb the stairs that lead to floors that don't exist, and absolutely not to open any doors they find in the impossible spaces between the official apartments, because once you enter those spaces, you become part of the building's continued expansion. You become another resident in the ever-growing structure, trapped in rooms that exist in dimensions parallel to our reality, but forever out of reach of the normal world. The last documented exploration of Building 12 happened in 2019, when a group of Czech paranormal investigators managed to spend 3 hours inside before fleeing. Their video footage, leaked online before being quickly removed by authorities, shows hallways that stretch beyond the camera's ability to capture rooms with geometries that hurt to look at directly, and brief glimpses of figures that might be the original residents, still wandering through spaces that grow larger every night. The investigation team's final transmission before losing contact was simple. The building is still growing. We can feel it expanding around us. The hallways have no end. So the next time you're walking through your apartment late at night and you feel like the distance between rooms has somehow changed, remember the residents of Building 12. Remember that some architectural mistakes can't be fixed by renovation or demolition. Some buildings aren't meant to follow the rules of normal space, and some doorways, once opened, can never be closed. If you found this story disturbing, make sure to subscribe for more forgotten histories and unexplained architectural anomalies. Hit that notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what I've discovered about the subway tunnel that leads to stations that don't exist on any map. And remember, just because something is documented doesn't mean it's fiction. Sometimes, the most terrifying stories are the ones that government archives tried to keep hidden. Until next time, sleep well, and maybe measure your hallways before you go to bed tonight, just to be sure.